trauma bonding is hard to explain because trauma bonding is something that we all know about, but it's one of these new topics. It's one of these new genres of thought, but it's clinical. It's 100% clinical. It is truly something that people are experiencing on a regular basis, and it's toxic. Let's really look at, we can unpack and really think about what we're talking about here. Trauma bonding. That's when you bond. And I want you to understand this. That's when you bond over trauma. Believe it or not, what brings you together, what connects you, is the trauma that you're suffering from. You know, one of the things that I want to go over is I really want to go over how trauma bonding has creeped into our lives and what you're going to be really shocked at. I mean, the thing that's going to really blow your mind is how often you've been a victim of trauma bonding, trauma-built relationships, and had no idea. You had no possible clue because you didn't know the signs. See, here's one of the things that I have to explain about a toxic relationship built on trauma. Trauma bonding or traumatic bonding can mean that you're unable to leave a toxic, an unhealthy relationship. You know, and that's even if your partner treats you poorly. See, let's jump right into it because here's the real issue. The issue is so many of us don't understand why we're so unable to leave an unhealthy relationship. This is something that we covered just last week, and we've been going through this over the last few weeks, and I love when you guys have joined in. Some of you have seen this series unfurl. You've seen how we've unpacked all of these different types of negative relationships. And as we wind down, you know, what we're going to culminate this by doing is talking about how all of these relationships end up being something that we call a traumatic bonding relationship. Again, special shout out to everybody on YouTube, everybody on Instagram, everybody on TruthSeekers.com, and all my Facebook family checking me out today. Thank you so much. I want you to like, I want you to comment, I want you to share, but what I really want you to do is jump over there to Truth Seekers, that's TruthSeekers.com. Excuse me, Truth Seekers, the Facebook page, don't go .com yet, Facebook page, and check us out. I want you to put that on right now. Jump in on the Truth Seekers page so that we can start to grow our audience there. Thank you so very much. But listen, how do you get into these toxic relationships that we categorize as trauma bonding? You know, Nisi, what's going on? Hope all is well. What's up, sis, in the house? See, first and foremost, let's discuss what trauma bonding is. See, trauma bonding is your inability to leave from an unhealthy relationship. See, one of the reasons why we find it hard is something we discussed last week, and that is we have this certain. Listen, first, before we go any further, this is not about sick people. I want to say this again. It's not about people who have some kind of mental issue. It's not about some people who need to go get some psychiatric help. It's about people who utilize poor techniques. It's about healthy people, cognizant people, emotionally mature people. It's about intelligent people. But most importantly, and I want to say this so you understand, it's about people who unfortunately use the wrong strategy in really important situations. You know, one of the reasons why we find ourselves, and this is how you know, in a trauma-related relationship, we call them trauma relationships. One of the reasons why you have these traumatic bondings is because of low self-esteem. And low self-esteem can happen to some of the most intelligent, some of the most beautiful, some of the most successful people. But you got to understand and you got to realize that the only way that you can get through this very serious situation is if you seriously start to look into what's holding you back, what's keeping you in this bondage, what it is that's causing this kind of pain. And what we find out is, first and foremost, it's low self-esteem. Some of the most confident people in the world are people who also struggle with low self-esteem in certain areas. So you can be confident in one place and really struggle in another. Negative thinking is a primary cause Okay? When a person comes into a relationship with a lot of negative thoughts, they are susceptible for these kind of toxic relationships. They are susceptible for trauma bonding. You know, and how do we get these? We get these, and we realize it because we become part of these relationships that are full, non-stop full of criticism. You know, that's an emotional abuse. And there's other emotional abuses too that we end up being in. I sit down and I talk to people all the time. And one of the primary things that I find out is that most people, they are not aware of how much emotional abuse they suffer from in a regular relationship. Some people have no clue of the amount of emotional abuse they're struggling with. And usually it's because they don't know that they're codependent. They don't know what that creates in their life. They don't understand. See, we can be creating anxiety, which leads to real stress. You know, putting you in a fight or flight kind of mindset. You know, and we're going to talk about this stuff today because too many of us have been in negative relationships. I look back over Father's Day. I'm talking to so many different fathers. I'm talking to so many different mothers. I'm talking to kids still working out their traumas as children, even as adults. I want you to understand that so many of these were rectifiable. So many of these were issues that could have been really worked out. But people waited so long because they didn't know they were suffering from it. Matter of fact, they thought they could just get through it. See, it's not a cold. It becomes a mindset, a way of thinking, a behavioral pattern that needs to be looked at. So you guys, while we're talking today, I want to tell you that so much of what I am talking to you about today is based on my experiences with other people. This is clinical information. But most importantly, it's based on the experiences that I've had when dealing with so many people about so important of a conversation. Yeah, what we're talking about today is something called trauma bonding. And I'm going to have some fun today as we talk about how we get into these traumatic relationships. Some of us don't understand the psychology of bonding. See, the psychology of bonding is that somebody offers something to you that causes you to want to incorporate their personality, their skill sets, their way of life into your life. See, this is what bonding truly is. And in a relationship that can be positive or that can be negative. This is a negative bonding experience. And typically what we don't know is that these experiences were created. These personality addictions were created in our childhood. And see, if I can get you to take a second away from mainstream life, if I can get you to step back and really start to look at who you are, really start to dig in to why you keep having the type of relationships that you're having, why it is you keep suffering from the same type of people in your life. If I can get you to look at this, if I can get you to see the traumatic reasons why we're in these relationships, I feel like I've done us a good deed. I feel like we have stepped into truth that we have all been seeking. See, some of us, we don't really understand how we get into these traumatic relationships, these relationships that are abusive, this trauma bonding. You know, what we don't understand is when you're in these unhealthy relationships, because some of us, we're in them. I mean, some of us, we understand. Some of us have dealt with this. Some of us right now today are in relationships where there's actually name calling. You know, you may say to yourself, well, it's not abusive. He knows not to put his hand on me. Well, that's not the only kind of abuse there is. See, here's what you need to understand. Some of the abuse that we deal with on a regular basis is abuse that we have allowed to happen because we don't consider it strong enough. See, we don't consider sometimes the name calling as something big. We don't consider all the put downs, all of the insults, all the constant belittling. See, we don't consider this a problem because we say to ourselves, well, you know, I kind of do that too. But this is what toxic bonding is, you know. And we're going to talk about why people allow themselves to be subjected to these kind of relationships. But it's important, truth seekers, for us to sit back and unpack this and see what's going on. I'd like to hear your thoughts about what you know about what we call toxic bonding. Have you ever heard of it? If you haven't ever heard of it, give me a shout out. If you have heard of it, give me a like. Okay? You know, here's what I'm talking about. Toxic bonding, you guys, is based on relationships that allow the pressuring you to do the kind of things that you don't want to do, to go against your own idea of happiness, your own understanding of enjoyment. See, why would you do that? Why would you allow yourself to be subjected to a situation where you find yourself always trying to appease, to appeal, or to make somebody else happy? And the reason why you find it out is because you are in a toxic relationship. These are the relationships that we've been going over for the last couple of weeks. I want to bring this to a head today because these are called toxic bonding relationships. These trauma bonding relationships have got to stop. And so today, what I want to talk about is when we allow these things to happen. For instance, ignoring when you are trying to communicate and yet and still, unfortunately, you stay in the situation. When you allow yourself to be the victim of some serious insults, humiliation, but now more importantly, you find yourself to be in situations where you're not even doing the things you like. Have you asked yourself what that's about? Because I'm going to tell you right now, these are what these conversations have been leading us to realize. See, when you're in relationships, I don't care if it's one you're dating, I don't care if it's your co-workers, I don't care if it's your church group. When you find yourself in relationships that do not serve you, you have to ask yourself where you're going with this. You know, one of the things that I realize is that, you know, we put ourselves in situations where we allow friends in our lives that are constantly lying. We know they're lying. I mean, every time you talk to them, they got another lie going. And see, you stay in these relationships thinking, well, you know, it's okay. It's just one of the quirks of this person. But you don't understand that this kind of person is the same person who's probably lying about you to somebody else. And see, you know, these are toxic relationships. You stay in them and you got to ask yourself, you know, where does this lead you? You know, what is up with the trauma bonding that involves that kind of stuff? You know, controlling who you speak to and tries to isolate us into situations, and you think that that's an okay thing. I've watched these kind of people. I've watched these kind of situations. We see this, and you know that this kind of person is the kind of person that's creating a negative and abusive relationship. See, one of the things that we're talking about right now, we're talking about how do you know if you're in a toxic relationship? Well, first off, it's an abusive relationship. How do you know it's an abusive relationship? Not because you are physically touched, because that's not where the majority of abuse comes from. See, when you are dealing with anxiety, when you're dealing with stress, when you're dealing with the toxicity of a negative relationship, what you have to understand is that this relationship is almost implicitly based on some form of an abuse. And we're walking through some of these abuses right now because it's important for you to see what you are dealing with from an outside perspective. I want you to take your relationship and I want you to separate yourself from it for a minute. I just want you to look at it. I want you to gaze from the outside. Tammy, Luke, what's going on? Final seconds in the house. Listen, what we're talking about is understanding whether or not you are in a negative, toxic relationship. This is what we've been talking about over the last few weeks. We've been spending a lot of money, a lot of time going into depth, going into the money of the problem, going into the true issues that are happening. Tammy, what's up? What's going on? And we've been talking about it. And today what we're doing is we're bringing it all to a head. We're talking about what it's all culminating to. And that is realizing that you're in an abusive relationship. You know, there's so much abuse that we can go on and talk about, because if you can't understand that you're in an abusive relationship, then you won't understand that you have a traumatic bonding experience. See, These are the excuses that people use to justify. I want to point this out. These are what people use to justify an emotionally abusive relationship. Some people truly believe that an emotionally abusive relationship is normal. They really do. I mean, what blows my mind, and I'm going to walk you through this real quick, is some people actually believe name calling, being belittled, being put down, being told where to go, being told what they want to do and not what you want to do, being told, that you shouldn't be out alone or you shouldn't be with your friends because, a good girl who's with somebody wouldn't do that, or a guy who's got a woman at home shouldn't do that. These controlling personalities, these people who sulk when they don't get their way. So many people, they think that this is normal behavior. Really? I mean, really? You think this? You got to really take a second, because there's absolutely no way in the world that's, some people believe the reason why they're in abusive relationships, the reason why they're in such traumatic relationships, the reason why they are struggling so bad is because it's their fault. They believe it's actually them that create the abusive behavior. See, I'm going to tell you this so you understand. You may very well antagonize a person, but you do not create their response. You may create an urge to respond. You may even create an urge to respond negatively. But it is a far cry from creating an urge to respond and being the sole reason why a person chose to respond in an abusive way. And again, what we're talking about right now, we're talking about why people allow abusive behavior to happen in their life. We're not just talking about with your boyfriend, girlfriend. Sometimes it's with your own family members. Sometimes it's with the co-workers at work. Sometimes it's with your family. Sometimes it's with your friends. Man, I'm telling you, sometimes it's with your own children. This belief that it's just their sense of humor. They like to snap. They like to, go all out. They like to, say things that are just so outside of decent. So I want to talk to you about this today because it's so important for you to understand what's going on. Some people actually believe these excuses. And before we can fix anything, before we can come to the table and actually consistently build a stronger you, we have to step away from these kind of conversations, these kind of mindsets. My girl Tammy, all the way out in Texas, she's saying, unfortunately, they were probably raised in an abusive family. And that's all they know and all they believe. And that's what they think love is. And the truth of the matter is, we talked about that. We talked about how one of the number one things that we've noticed is so much of these personality dependencies, these codependent relationships, these negative beliefs about ourselves, these things we're willing to endure, were based on our childhood. And we're going to unpack that a little more. We're going to talk about that a little more. I want to say to you guys, thank you so very much. You checking out, you're hanging out, you're kicking it. Truth Seekers tonight. That's Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Central Time, right here. I want you to like, I want you to comment, I want you to share. But do me a favor. I want you, if possible, I want you to jump on. Check this out. Jump on to Truth Seekers. That's TruthSeekers. Go right over to Facebook, Truth Seekers. That's our professional page. If you can do me that favor and then hit the love button, I would appreciate it so much. Let me know that you did it. Hey, send that one, like that one. Tell people to join in on that one, because that's how we're going to grow our community and start to really have an effective conversation. Believe it or not, this is seen by so many people. We're in so many different groups. We're chatting with so many different people. And it's so awesome because we get a chance to really share what we're talking about and get people in on the conversation. Nick at Night, what's going on? What is happening? One of the things that I think we need to, going back to what we were talking about, a kind of abusive relationships that we're in and the excuses that we use to justify them. One of the things I have to say before I go any further, listen to me. When you stop making excuses for abusive behavior, that is the moment you start to heal as an individual. That's the moment you start to clean out the environment around you. That's the moment you give yourself a fighting chance to survive, to build the you want. We don't want stress. We don't want to constantly be arguing, constantly be in a negative relationship, constantly be in a state of confusion, constantly be in a state of anxiety. But see, if you don't understand what's going on, if you're constantly making excuses for why you're dealing with what you're dealing with, what do you expect to happen? See, some of us believe that it's just a weird way each individual shows their love. Some people actually had the audacity to believe that negative behavior, being hurtful to somebody else is actually their way of showing they love. They wouldn't do it if they didn't care. See, you got to walk away from a belief in that kind of area. You've got to stop believing somehow that somebody is in their right state of mind when there's any particular reason for them to be abusive to you, emotionally, psychologically, physically, what have you. See, but worse than that is the belief that it's a justifiable act by the person who's receiving the abuse. We can't play that game. We can't believe that it's just tit for tat. Well, I've been mean to. See, when we start to believe this, then we open the door for a reoccurrence. But we also miss the awareness that this is a codependency. And we'll talk about that more. It's just the way he or she is. We got to stop this. See, some of us need somebody to talk to. And I want you to understand that this isn't because you're crazy. This is because you need to walk through something that is so important to you. It's so important for your success in life to get rid of the stress, to become the person you always thought you were, to not allow the actions of other people to create a systemic pattern of negative reactions by you. We got to take on the responsibility. We got to take on the awareness and the accountability that it's our responsibility to react in a way that protects us long term. Okay? So that means that in order for us to really sit down and fix the issue, we have to realize that some of the issue is in our lack of awareness that we are in a trauma bond. Signs of trauma bonding, I like to break them down. One of the major things that I've noticed about people when I talk to them about moving, what's going on, Clark Street in the house, listen to this. What bothers me is when I talk to somebody and all of a sudden they get this powerlessness. And I'm trying to explain to them at that moment, listen, I respect you. I truly think what you're feeling feels real. But it's actually psychological. What that means is that it's actually really something you're feeling. It's emotionally real. But you have the final control over it. This is how I explain it. See, because some people, you try to get them to become aware of what they're doing. You try to get them to react to the fact that they're going through it. And the very first thing they get is this powerlessness. And then they have to accept something. Watch this, family. They have to accept that they're living like a victim. Some of you know people like this. Some of you deal with people like this every day. You try to talk to them about getting out. You try to talk to them about being, accountable for their relationship. You start talking to them about coming up with some form of plan that allows them to remove themselves from a relationship that they're not happy with. I don't care if it's a relationship with their boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives, mother, father, neighbor, roommate, whatever. Some of you, it's in your own church. But I'm going to say it to you. What I'm going to say to you so you understand, what I'm going to say to you so there's no misunderstanding, is that this is playing the victim. This tendency to just complain instead of do something. You know what I mean? We talked about this a few weeks ago. We went through all the different subtleties of playing the victim, knowing whether you're a victim. And today we're going to bring this back and tell you the reason why so many of us are in relationships we don't want to be in is because we feel powerless because we're playing the victim role. We just complain about things. We don't really feel we have the ability to change them. You know, we don't get angry, which is sad. You never really tell that somebody's not happy. You just see they're not living the life that they're supposed to. You know, they try to play like it's all good, you know. Hey, what's going on? You know, and you like, hold on, wait a minute. You're not happy. You know, these are this is what I am talking about. These kind of situations where we play the victim. You know, you're convinced that everyone around you, you know, is wrong about your situation. But you're not. You know, that's not the case. I want to stop right now and say what's going on to my beautiful wife, Shay. Shay, thank you so much for checking me out. You know I feel so much better when you are checking in and checking out the show. Love you to death. Thank you so very much. One of the things, too, is that, you know, these are the kind of people that when you deal with them, you know, they're always convinced everybody's just bad talking to them and nobody, you know, really cares about them. See, these are the people who are playing the victim, you know. And they always expect you to know. Here's what I ask you. Do you do that? Sometimes do you feel that you are always expecting the other person to know how you feel? Because if you don't articulate how you feel, then you may be the one playing the victim. You know, this is so real. Because if you understand this, then you can start. I mean, watch this. We are starting to walk towards a more successful life. But some of the things you have to understand, I love how Erykah Badu said, bag lady, you're going to hurt your back carrying all them bags like that, right? I mean, sometimes we are carrying baggage from such negative relationships. We are carrying baggage of being a victim. Tammy says, I know a lot of people are scared to be alone. So they'd rather be unhappy because at least they have somebody, and that in some weird way makes them feel happy, you know, and that's exactly the truth. You know, deep down, there are moments where they don't even know if they trust the person they're with, you know, but yet you can't leave. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, let's talk about this. How is this possible? How is it that you're in a relationship with somebody you don't trust? You know, if you feel like it's you're the one who doesn't trust well, you know, I really hope that you go back and look at some of my videos about how to better trust people. You know, I hope that you recognize that you already have the capacity to trust. But there may be a reason you don't trust the person, you know, and that might be because you don't really know what trust is. Some of us are in relationships right now where we don't trust because we have absolutely no ability to understand self-trust. And as I say this, my girl Tammy right there says the same exact thing. See, in order for you to truly know what it means to trust somebody, you have to truly know what it means to trust yourself. And if you go back and look at some of our videos, we talk about how to trust yourself, you know, how to work on trusting yourself. So many of us don't know how to listen to our inner voice. We listen to the insecure voice. The insecure voice is so much louder than our inner voice, but our inner voice is the one that really directs us and gets us where we're trying to go. You know, we have to understand attachment theory. One of the things that I try to talk to people about here, one of the things that I try to get people to understand is an awareness on attachment theory. So an attachment theory basically means that when you were a child, so many of us, we suffered from attachment issues. And believe it or not, you can get an entirely Here's how I want you to think about the brain. I want you to think about the brain like it's a bug or a simple glitch on a computer, that because something was jarred wrong, it was entered incorrectly, we now have some kind of program fail where we're constantly trying to do a process in our thinking, in our computing, that just isn't correct. It just doesn't work right. And that's what this whole thing is about. What we're talking about, why the truth seekers truth seek. Because there is a path towards enlightenment. There is a path towards correcting your issue. There is a path towards resetting the way that you think. But you have to be willing. Not just able, you have to first be willing to deal with the issues that we're going through. You know, too many times what I realize is that we are not willing, regardless if we were ever able. You know, I hear people and they talk about this, you know, this strangeness about how, you know, how everything is exactly normal. And as you listen to people, you find out there's absolutely nothing normal about these kind of situations. So I hope you guys understand how it really blows my mind. It hurts my heart because too often, too many times, we feel like it's okay to allow ourselves to be in hurt. Because what we don't understand is that if you're willing to allow yourself to be hurt, you are also willing to allow yourself to hurt other people. You know, I've listened to people talk about these relationships that were like so intense because they're complex and they involve, you know, I call them the promise relationships. You guys know the kind of relationships I'm talking about. This is one of those trauma bonding relationships. These relationships that are always built on promise. You know, I promise things will get better. You know, I promise I'll marry you one day. We'll figure this out. I promise that I'll deal with the problems that I have. I promise that when I get a job, everything will be different. You know, because when you allow yourself in a relationship that's all based on promises, what you end up finding yourself in is a relationship full of anxiety, stress, and disappointment. And when you allow yourself to do that, as we all know, that transfers over and becomes what other people experience. You know, it becomes the hurt that was created by hurt. And we don't want to be a part of that. We don't want to have that kind of issue. So you got to remove yourself. You got to remove yourself. Yes. So many of us, we struggle with this, you know. Sometimes abusive relationships, what I've noticed is sometimes abusive relationships suffers. People who have been in these kind of relationships, they always seem to forget what they've been through and only remember the good things. You talk to people who are in abusive relationships and they don't really recall all the abuse. They seem to want to focus on the good times. They seem to want to focus on what they believe to be the majority. You know, I never forget this barber. And this barber, he was cutting this guy's hair and he made a plug in the guy's hair. And at the end of the haircut, he said, "Hey, I'm going to give you a couple dollars off because I messed up." And the guy looked at his haircut and he's like, "You messed up my hair?" It's like, dude, I don't like the haircut. He's like, "What are you talking about? Everything else looks really nice. I'm giving you a discount because I only messed up a piece of it." See, in this guy's mind, he actually did a good job minus one little mistake. See, because he was focused on all the good, he didn't even recognize the bad. Let me tell you something. The bad is part of the haircut. If you've got a bad spot in your hair, then you've got a bad haircut. If you've got a dirty spot in your house, if your closets are dirty, you have a dirty house. Okay? You have to take the totality of the issue. So many of us, we look at the positives, but we're not willing to deeply analyze and take accountability for the negatives. You know? Here's the epitome of codependency. The codependent person truly believes they can change somebody. See, when you know you're in a trauma bond, when you know you're in a toxic relationship, when you know you're in a relationship that's not healthy for you, the very first thing that you realize is there is a part of this person you didn't like that you actually believed you had the ability to change. And that creates a codependency. That right there is codependency. Another way that you know that you are in an abusive, traumatic, and negative toxic relationship is that almost every single person who likes you tells you you need to get out of that situation. You know, and this is serious. And we're not just talking about, again, we're not just talking about marital situations. We're not talking about, you know, boyfriends, girlfriends, fiancés. No. Sometimes it's just your best friend. People are like, how do y'all get along? You're always arguing. You always got some negative thing going. You got to look at this. You got to ask yourself about this. You got to take accountability. Because if you don't understand how other people are viewing your relationship, maybe it's because you are not viewing your relationship as well as you should. You know? It's some serious stuff, you guys, because today, you know, we're going to kind of wrap up the negative relationships. But before we finish, I just want to go over this. For those of you who want more in-depth conversation, go look over our Tuesday Truth Seekers talks. We've really broken down and unpacked a lot of different ones. So I'm hopeful that we can get more and more engagement on this and awareness of what's happening. So you guys go back, take some time, go to Truth Seekers. You can go to YouTube Truth Seekers, and you can go back and look over at the various videos that we've done on that. So hopefully you do. Because if you don't realize that other people see a part of the relationship that you're not paying attention to, if you're not willing to take on that criticism, if you're not willing to take on the possibility that other people are seeing things that are making your relationship unhealthy, the chances are, and I'm going to say this to you really slow, chances are you're going to end up defending it and taking it as somebody just criticizing your relationship. And you start to get on the defensive and you feel like everybody's trying to, you know, pull us apart. Matter of fact, sometimes the toxic person does a great job of convincing you that that's what's happening. Because once they can separate you from the people who really care about what the heck is going on in your life, well, they can make things more comfortable for them, which ultimately makes it more toxic for you. And I want you to really wrestle with this. I want you to think about this, because I've talked to people sometimes, and you know, I never criticize anybody's relationship. I never tell anybody what they should do. But what I do tell people are the signs of a healthy relationship, the signs of an unhealthy relationship, the things that people in unhealthy relationships suffer from, and the things that people who are looking for a more healthy relationship should do. And you know, that may not ever be you, none of those people. And that's fine. But it's my job, it's my training, it's my passion to talk to people about how to build a more healthier you. You know? Because before you can get out there and make $1 million, before you can get out there and have the quality of life that you want, before you can get out there and own the kind of businesses, build the kind of dreams that you want to, you got to do some house cleaning. You got to start to look at the people that are nurturing you. Are they nurturing you with something positive? Are they nurturing you with poison? Are you allowing yourself to be in a positive situation? Or are you holding on to something that's been tearing you down? You know? One of the things that I think a lot of us need to do is take a serious moment and reflect on what kind of relationship we're trying to have. You know, if you've tried to leave, but you physically feel ill. You know, I talked to a person. This dude said, I tried to leave, but just the stress, the emotional hardship, it made me feel physically ill. You know, he felt so terrible after he was leaving. He felt like he was hurting himself by walking away from her. Because, you know, if you love somebody, you're not supposed to do that. And you know, he came back. And you know, if you feel that connected to somebody who is not healthy for you, you need to talk to somebody. Because you may not be able to do this one completely by yourself. Not because you don't have the ability, not because you don't have all the tools, but because you may be so caught into your thinking, so emotionally committed to your relationship that you are not giving your true intellectual, caring, protecting self a word in edgewise. You know, the other issue that I've noticed, and you know, unfortunately our time is running, so I got to finish this out. But one of the other issues that I noticed is the kind of relationships that people put themselves in where they're constantly allowing themselves to be let down. Constantly allowing themselves to be let down. And one of the primary reasons why we're constantly allowing ourselves to be let down is because we do not set boundaries. That's one of the primary reasons. And that's why one of the very first videos I did was on how to properly set boundaries. Because if you do not set boundaries up, you are leaving yourself in a bad situation. You are allowing yourself an opportunity to be mistreated, and you're really confusing the heck out of the person you are with. You need to set solid boundaries. Some of us just don't understand what a giving relationship is. And because you don't know what a giving relationship is, you allow yourself to overgive. You allow people to give too little. And you allow yourself to feel strained in a relationship. And this is a real issue because, you know, if I could just get people to set boundaries and understand what it means to give. Too many people, they spend so much of their life trying to show people what it is they have to offer, but they never really look at the quality of what the other person is offering them. Man, some of y'all know what I'm talking about. And it's sad, it's unfortunate, but it's real. You know, we're blinded. We're blinded by what proper expectations are. And we don't realize when we're actually being controlling, when we're being controlled, and what it means to have a 50-50 relationship. See, and so much of this goes back to our childhood. So much of this goes back to who we were when we were younger. So much of this, I tell people all the time, believe it or not, so much of this goes back to the way we were treated as kids. You know, one of the examples that I have of trauma bonding is, you know, like just child abuse. Normal, general child abuse. Now, let me tell you what it is, because I've watched some of you do this with your own children. Yeah, I'm going to hurt somebody's feeling today because I've watched some of you do this with your own children. You know, these people, they do something like, you know, they're the same persons always telling the child that they're special, always telling the child they're beautiful, always telling the child that they're something, but always giving the child some form of negative treatment, physical abuse. And then they give them some positive. They do something nice for them to make up for it. If you're the kind of person who does that, let me tell you something. You are starting the habit at home. See, after a while, the child doesn't know the difference between the fear part or the excitement part. And this allows them to become caught in this pleasure-pain sequence. Some of you are dealing with it right now. Some of you, if you look back and you think about it, you realize that you are willing to tolerate a little bit of pain with your pleasure. And I've even heard songs about it. It's like it's sultry or something. You know, it's sick. You know, there should be no pain You should not have to struggle. You should not have to deal with abuse. You should not have to deal with toxicities in order to enjoy a relationship. There may be some figuring each other out in the beginning, but common decent behavior, respect for somebody at all times is not something that you need to negotiate. If you're in a relationship that's positive and self-serving and healthy and nurturing to both people. You know, adults, the funny thing is that their trauma bonding is really, really weird. It's kind of subtle. So you got to be more aware of what's going on. A lot of us don't understand where we are constantly, because we're constantly, if you're verbally criticized, you're always being let down, always being manipulated. You got to ask yourself right there, this kind of relationship that I'm trying to be in, this kind of situation I'm trying to get out of. And be honest with yourself. Because some of the times, this is what creates having relationships with people who are alcoholics, people who, you know, are dealing with drugs. And these are going back to these one-day relationships. One day I'm going to get out. One day I'm going to get better. One day we're going to, you know, have a normal relationship. You know, but the thing is that these relationships, these trauma bonds, they put you into these survival modes, you know. And that's what we don't understand, is that our bodies are dealing with anxiety, with trauma. Okay, with stress, ultimately leading in depression. You know, we got to stop this. We got to realize what's going on. And you got to look at your own self. You got to ask yourself, is this kind of relationship I'm putting myself into? Is this the kind of person I want to be? I mean, seriously, at what point are we going to kind of let 2017's problems? We're already halfway through 2018. We got to let it go. We got to move away. We got to understand that trauma bonding is a sickness, but it's not a disease. It's just a poor strategy. Okay? So many of us, we can deal with our problems. We can deal with the relationships. If we're willing to commit, if we're willing to focus, if we're willing to say to ourselves, no more. I'm done with it. I can't do it anymore. Hey, this is your boy ToneDuncan. This has been a pleasure. I'm looking at everybody's comments. I'm loving what I'm talking about, loving what you're talking about, loving how we're engaging. This is the kind of stuff that really makes me look forward to Tuesdays. Truth Seekers, right here. Hey, you guys, I've got to fly. Time is not on my side anymore, but I want to say first and foremost, thank you so very much. It's a privilege. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to hang out with you. I want you to like, I want you to comment, I want you to share, but I most importantly want you guys to jump on the Truth Seekers. That's TruthSeekers on Facebook. Jump in, jump on. I want you to like, I want you to comment, I want you to join the fam, join the conversation. Until next week, it's your boy ToneDuncan, and I'm saying peace. See ya.